Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And it's been another long week of lockdown.
Yeah, we have been watching more period dramas. We're watching Gentleman Jack right now. It's really good.
I kind of finally bit the bullet and was like, okay, let's get BritBox. Even though I feel like that I should be entitled to that for free.
I have just started reading American Royals ahead of our little book club episode we're going to do next week.
I've finished it.
Why don't you tell our listeners what it's about in case they don't know it?
Okay, so no spoilers, obviously, because I don't want to ruin it for you. But American Royals takes place in an alternative America where George Washington became the first king of America rather than the first president. And there's been a royal family ever since.
Yeah, so it's told from the perspective of 4 different women. You've got the first in line to the throne, her younger sister, her best friend who's not royal, and then another woman who wants to marry the Queen-to-be's younger brother.
And all the messiness that involves.
Yeah, it's pretty good so far, but we'll talk about that next week. But in the meantime, I guess what I'm really interested in it is the idea of what the hell would make any country want a royal family.
Yeah.
So I know, I can't believe it, but I know we have some Americans that listen to this podcast. If you are an American, I would love to know what you like about the royals, and if you do wish there were real life American royals, why?
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of Hamilton this week at the same time as finishing the book. And so I was really like, oh my God, why would anybody want this? I guess it would definitely seem like a kind of nice alternative to Trump at the moment.
But yeah, let us know. Leave us a 5-star review and tell us why. Or you can contact us on social media.
As well as leaving us a 5-star review.
At AirheadsPod is our handle on Instagram and Twitter, or Airheads on Facebook. Anyway, into the big news of the week. It was such a huge week for fans of one particular royal who have been waiting impatiently for nigh on 3 years to hear from their king, their Prince Philip.
He spoke for the first time since 2017 when he officially retired from service to mark World Immunisation Week. So this, the Telegraph notes, accompanies his lifelong interest in science and engineering, something that we also know from The Crown. But they say it's the first solo written message of its kind from him in over a decade, because he's normally only spoken in public speeches, like out loud, rather than writing something specifically. And he said, "I wanted to recognise the vital and urgent work being done by so many to tackle the pandemic, by those in the medical and scientific professions, at universities and research institutions, all united in working to protect us from COVID-19. On behalf of those of us who remain safe and at home, I also wanted to thank all key workers who ensure the infrastructure of our life continues. The staff and volunteers working in food production and distribution, those keeping postal and delivery services going, and those ensuring the rubbish continues to be collected."
I like that bit.
Yeah.
I am curious, though, why he did this, because I don't think anybody was thinking that he was somehow negligent by not making some kind of public statement about this. You know, he hasn't made a statement about anything in so long, and everyone's like, okay, he's 98, he's retired, we don't need him to do this. So I was wondering if the timing of the statement might have had anything to do with the drama this week around Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and their letter to the tabloids, which we discussed in our bonus episode on Tuesday. If you haven't heard it yet, go back and listen to that. But this message from Prince Philip came out on Monday in the middle of all of the debate around Harry and Meghan's tabloid letter.
Yeah, it did seem like a real bolt from the blue. Like, where was it coming from? And people did sort of react to it as though, like, this is what we want from our royals. Over here in the UK, people have been going really mad for any time the royal family have been supporting NHS workers, talking about, community work. And we've seen a lot of that from the Cambridges and from Charles and Camilla, which we'll talk about later. So this was kind of very much in that vein. And it was in pretty big contrast to what was going on with Harry and Meghan at the time.
And certainly you could see it on the front pages of a lot of the newspapers over here, specifically the tabloids, where they were saying, basically, this is what we want to hear from the royals, not from Harry.
Yeah.
Not whatever Harry's been saying.
But on the subject of Harry and Meghan, we're kind of used at this point to any Harry and Meghan news generating like an incredibly divisive reaction from people. But with this particular letter to the tabloids, we found that the response has been a fair bit less sympathetic than usual.
Over here, certainly,
Yeah,
in the UK. I've noticed as well that a lot of the defenders of Harry and Meghan, they've put their Rachel Zane hats on. They've been pointing out all the potential legal uses of this letter and arguing how it could factor into court cases in the future and all kinds of things like this. But unfortunately, Tom and I are not Harvey Specter and Jessica Pearson. We are not going to play backseat lawyer with all of this. We're absolutely not qualified to speculate on any of the legal stuff whatsoever. So we're just not going to do that. But I will just say that if that was the sole reason for this letter, I feel like it could have been done in a shorter and more concise manner. Although I know that is not their style, I do feel like they could maybe have made some concessions given the present situation.
Well, speaking of concessions, apparently, according to the Times, they didn't tell Charles before they sent the letter. But Harry did call the Queen from California to discuss the plans, apparently only in the broadest terms. So a source told the Times he did not go into specific details.
They also cleared up through a source that although they said there'll be no corroboration with the tabloids, they will allow their legal team to do fact-checking for them. So I feel like that would have come in handy for them to have said.
Yeah, there was definitely room in that letter for them to mention that, because I think fact-checking is obviously really important.
The source also told the Times it's not a decision they have made lightly. They have battled emotionally with their relationship with the press for some time.
I thought this was very telling, because if it wasn't an easy decision for them to make, to send this letter, then I don't think it needs to be this really clear-cut thing for everyone to have a certain and definite opinion on. It's a very nuanced and messy situation, and I think it's okay for us all to feel a bit like, I like this about it, I don't like that about it, I don't know what this means going forward. Like, we're allowed to be confused.
I did love in the Pop Bitch newsletter this week, they pointed out that the Daily Star, which is another British tabloid that was not included in the 4 tabloids that Harry and Meghan addressed their letter to.
If you hate the Daily Mail, you'll love the Daily Star.
Pop Bitch says, the Daily Star has since branded itself the Sussexes' favourite paper on account of the fact that they avoided the chop, but they're being a little presumptuous. One of the other titles to escape the Sussex shit list was the Sunday Sport, Britain's premier source of scantily clad lovelies, sex dwarf stories, and reports on the many inventive ways that men have managed to mangle their bellends. We don't think this was an oversight. Rumour has it the Sport was one of Harry's preferred reads back in the day. I cannot overstate how hilarious the Sunday Sport is, and the idea of Prince Harry reading the Sunday Sport.
The idea of Prince Harry sending like an equerry to go and get it for him.
So funny. I'm pretty sure they have a Twitter where they post their front pages, and even if you just look through the front page, it's like, wow, it's some pretty amazing stuff.
We did have a little note on the timing of the letter, because we were very interested in who was reporting on it and when and why. But some listeners said that Harry and Meghan didn't release the letter, they just sent it to the 4 papers involved. But we saw that it was covered by The Guardian and the Financial Times on Monday, while the tabloids seem to have received it so late that they didn't cover it until Tuesday. That was, of course, the Queen's birthday, and that became a whole nother thing about Harry and Meghan trying to step on the Queen's birthday.
I mean, that is very unfortunate timing. I hadn't even really thought of that. But I did think it was unusual that it had appeared in the Monday paper of The Guardian, but none of the tabloids were covering it until the Tuesday.
But I suppose, the Queen does have 2 birthdays, so you're twice as likely to be stepping on her celebrations.
For her first birthday, her actual birthday, when she turned 94 on Tuesday, the royal family released some unseen childhood footage of her on social media, accompanied by some very groovy stock music, I thought, which just made me think that this is another influence of Meghan and Sussex Royal, that they loved using this funky stock music, and that this will be perhaps a long-standing Sussex Royal legacy on the royal family.
She will truly never be forgotten. She is a historic figure. But for the first time in the Queen's reign of 68 years, there was no gun salute and no ringing of the bells. This was per her request.
Yeah, and she said she felt it wasn't appropriate or a source close to her said she felt it wasn't appropriate in the current situation. So how did she celebrate, Tom?
Well, she's said to have celebrated, like the rest of us, with Zoom calls and also a chocolate Genoese sponge cake with Prince Philip. We got some information on how she receives her cake, which apparently is the same every year.
Every single year. She's 94 and she's had this exact same cake.
Hey, she knows what she likes. And she likes a chocolate Genoese sponge with no birthday candles.
That's so weird to me. Do they sing?
Do you think either her or Philip have enough puff to blow out candles? My favourite detail from it was that she sends... Okay, so she has only tiny slices of this and can apparently make the cake last up to a week.
This is coming from a former palace chef who used to make these cakes for her. And he described them as sending the leftovers down to the servants after a week. So, I wonder how this is going to work this year when there's only, 5 of them in the house. They've been watching the Queen and Philip pick over these crumbs for the past few days. And finally on Tuesday they get to dive in.
Do you think the Queen notes how much of the cake she's eaten per day so that none of the servants are stealing from her?
That's so mean.
But we did see a really exciting story about the Queen.
It makes us think that she could also have spent the day surrounded by her favourite animals. Not dogs, not horses, but budgies.
Budgie is a little helicopter.
This is according to the Mail on Sunday. They had a story. While much has been written about her love of horses and dogs, little is known about her fondness for budgies. Until right now, when we saw a black and white picture of her when she was younger, surrounded by her budgies. And they report that she has a chatter of about 100 budgerigars that live in an aviary close to her private apartments in Windsor Castle. That is so weird.
She is really doing everything to cement this kind of like mad old woman look. Like literally just going and standing in a room full of birds.
I mean, I would lose it if they shared a picture or a video of her surrounded by these chirping budgies. I remember we had budgies growing up and I would go insane when I was studying for my exams because they were so loud and noisy, and that was with 2. If she has 100, it must be like cacophonous in there anytime she walks in.
Well, a lot of people get nervous with the random flapping of birds and things like that. She clearly loves it because we know that she lets bats into Balmoral and has the servants run around with nets trying to get them out.
But anyway, back to her birthday. She got happy birthday posts on Instagram and Twitter from Clarence House and Kensington Royal. I know you were particularly fond of the Clarence House post.
Oh, yeah. Charles really came across as quite needy in his. I think there was one of the pictures was literally him reaching out towards her.
I know, love me, mummy, please. But it had been reported that the Queen would be having private calls with members of her family, but they wouldn't be releasing any further details. However, we did learn that one of the calls she got was from Harry, Meghan and Archie, which was reported by a few outlets, including Harper's Bazaar and Hello Magazine.
This didn't go down that well with the Daily Mail, who seemed very bitter about it all. They said, privacy-obsessed Prince Harry and Meghan Markle rushed to tell their favourite media about birthday Zoom chat with the Queen and Archie, even though Palace said all royals should keep their calls discreet. I mean, let's not have the tabloids talking about keeping calls discreet.
Yeah, they talked about how they had this video call, but it was hardly an intimate affair. The privacy-obsessed couple were so keen to tell the world about the afternoon chat that they instructed their spokesman to email a selection of hand-picked publications to share the news shortly afterwards. I mean, my God, is this what it's going to be like from now on, this kind of coverage? It is funny in how petty it is, but that's going to be grating after a while,
Yeah.
I feel. But seriously, as over the top as it is, the Mail does have a point. You know, we know about this call because Harry and Meghan want us to know about it, which, I mean, they are stuck in this kind of no-win situation. If they don't release any kind of statement about it, then it gives tabloids free rein to say that they ignored the Queen on her birthday. But obviously if they do, then they look like they're desperate for attention. So clearly they decided that it was more important to them to show that they hadn't ignored the Queen, and they wanted to get ahead of those stories that suggest that they may have. But I'm just imagining this Zoom call with the Queen, and like how far into the call that they sing happy birthday, like they ask her how she's doing, and then, you know, by the way, is it okay if we sent out a statement to a number of our favourite journalists to say that we've done this call? Like, that just seems so awkward to me.
Yeah, and we were talking about it a bit because if they had social media, this is the kind of thing that they can communicate through that. Like,
totally.
Not necessarily saying we called them, but they can post, you know, a happy birthday post, they can leave comments, all the stuff that they used to do. And now it seems like they're really suffering without that outlet, because everything they say comes out as such like a hard press release style announcement. And it's like, this isn't really a big deal. It's only made into a big deal because of the way we're finding out about it.
And because it's very much a story about their personal life.
Yeah.
And their whole thing is that they want privacy and they don't want people to be prying into their personal life. But if they're going to make statements like this, it could be seen by some as being hypocritical.
Yeah, I see why they want to draw like a really hard line, but they seem to be the ones who are blurring it at the moment. So it's kind of tricky to get on board. Harry and Meghan aren't the only people playing favourites with the media, because Charles has written an article for his favourite magazine, Country Life.
We know that Charles has guest edited this magazine before. He seems to have a good relationship with them. Obviously, so much of his work has to do with agriculture and in terms of the duchy with farmers and things like that. So it makes a lot of sense. In this case, he was writing about how we must not take farmers for granted and that food does not happen by magic. But he also shared a little bit of insight into his working life at Burke Hall, where he has been learning about virtual parties and viral videos.
Doesn't really sound like working life to me.
He wrote, "We have seen the very best use of technology, allowing people to keep working, but also to keep in touch through virtual parties, games, singing, and some of the funniest videos I have seen for a long time." Well, oh my God. Immediately I was calling to you saying, what are these videos? Are these animal videos? Are these dance challenges? Are they impressions? Is it Giant Baby? What's Charles' style of viral video?
I definitely think he loves Giant Baby.
Is Charles harassing all members of his family with his favourite, like, stupid viral videos that Will is going, oh God, it's him again. He's got another one.
I don't know how to respond. If I don't say anything, it's really rude, but I don't want to encourage him.
We were saying one that we definitely thought he would like is one that my dad showed us of a shopkeeper who is advertising a very special kind of face mask, which is a Union Jack thong. You love that one too.
I love
Look at
that
you, you're
one.
cracking
That
up.
was so good. Actually, sorry, can we stop recording for a second?
You just want to watch it again. If you had Charles on WhatsApp, you would have forwarded that to him straight away.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, you know he's got a great sense of humour, because he also committed
So
like
funny.
a absolutely stellar prank. So, according to the Daily Mail, Charles wants to introduce 500 beef cattle to the Sandringham estate so their manure can be spread over fields where crops are grown. And it's understood that this move is part of his plan to make the estate fully organic by July.
But
One of the proposed sites for this heap of shit is less than half a mile from Anne Hall, which is where Kate and Will are holed up in lockdown.
So they have quotes from a villager who said, organic farming comes at a price for people who live downwind of a dung heap or next door to the fields where slurry is being sprayed around. William and Kate are going to have to put up with the smell like everyone else.
This is incredible. Charles is going to cover their fields in shit. Is this payback for Will getting a bit cocky and kind of positioning himself as the strong future king?
Or is this a kind of passive-aggressive move to try to get them to spend more time in London and to do more work? I mean, who knows why, but it's a hilarious proposal. However, Kings Lynn and the West Norfolk Borough Council still has to decide whether or not to give consent for this proposal. Sandringham Parish councillors say they support the principle of moving to more sustainable organic farming and believe the cattle herd will be good for the local economy in enhancing employment opportunities for young local people. But in a letter to the district council, they added, "We would want you to be satisfied that there will be no escape of obnoxious odours that will impact surrounding residents' enjoyment of their lives or impact their well-being." I mean, obviously this is about more than Will and Kate. It would be terrible if your home was just constantly smelling like manure.
Well, we'll know if they approve it because we'll suddenly get a lot less videos of them stepping outside their house to do the clap for carers. Suddenly they'll be behind the windows doing it like Camilla.
The birthday portraits will move indoors.
Yeah.
Will and Kate also gave their backing to a new mental health initiative for frontline workers called Our Frontline, which provides online resources as well as a call and text helpline with the Samaritans, Mind, Hospice UK and the Shout text service that you might remember they launched with Harry and Meghan last year. So they've been busy working, but
they did find time to celebrate little Louis's birthday.
They even sang him his favourite song
in the whole world.
Happy birthday!
Which is really handy.
How many rounds of happy birthday does Louis make them do? He probably makes them sing it all week long.
Yeah, I mean, I would if I was a prince.
It's Tom's birthday this week, so
hint, hint.
I'll be singing happy birthday round the clock. We also got some new portraits of our little bloke, and my, how he's grown. I couldn't get over this. I feel like he looks like a different person.
I know, he's totally transformed from the little pub landlord that I loved so much.
Yeah, he's like a little mini Kate now. But we saw him doing some finger painting in these photos. I'm sure you've all seen them by now, where he's doing these rainbow pictures over here. And I think in other countries as well, people have been putting pictures of rainbows in their windows and in support of the NHS and frontline workers. So he was doing those, which was a very, very savvy move on Kate's part to get him to do that, because it's sort of sending a message of support, and was also very, very cute. But I know you had a little bit of a conspiracy theory the minute I showed Tom these photos. He's like, wait, zoom in.
And I was really delighted to see that Elizabeth Holmes, the So Many Thoughts royal commentator, she had exactly the same reaction as me, which is that, hang on, in one of these photos, he's got the red on his palm and the blue on his fingers, but in the finished product, the red is on his fingers and the blue on the palm. How many times has he done it? Did he even do that? What's going on?
Certainly puts the Mother's Day card in a different light, doesn't it? But no, it was very cute, and as I was saying, I thought it was a very clever move. And as well as that, it gives another example of Kate's like real believer taste in haircuts. She loves that swooping fringe on her boys. Has she got young beebs on her Pinterest boards?
And at what point are they all going to get the quarantine buzz cuts?
I did think it was kind of sweet in the finished picture that they shared that the photo like doesn't lie flat. The piece of paper doesn't lie flat on the green card behind it, because obviously it never does when you try to do that. And that there's all like glue marks around the edge. I find that very relatable.
Yeah. Less
relatable was Louis' checked shirt that he was doing the painting in with no paint on it whatsoever. This shirt, we learned, was part of a set with dungarees and came from Sainsbury's. It was £12. So that was another nice little move on Kate's part.
And Digital Dave struck gold again with the Instagram v-reality meme. We had a picture of Louis with the colourful paint on his hands, smiling to the camera, looking spotless. Angelic, yeah. And then the next one was him smushing it all over his face.
Yeah, that was very cute. And yeah, another nice little move that has the painted fingerprints of David Watkins, the former Harry and Meghan social media coordinator, now Will and Kate social media coordinator, all over it. I did also enjoy that the Mail had quotes from a very chatty source talking about Louis and how they celebrated Louis' birthday. They said of the Cambridges, they're just a really normal, happy, rumbustious family. I had to Google this word because I'd never heard it before.
And when I heard you say it, I was like, Maeve doesn't know how to pronounce rambunctious.
No, this is an entirely separate word that basically means
the same thing.
Yeah, boisterous, lively. Anyway, the source goes on. Louis has inherited George's scooter. And it won't be long before he's out of the carrier on Catherine's bike and catching up with his brother and sister. He can very much hold his own. Thank you very much.
He doesn't need any help. I laughed so much at this because when you hear like Prince Louis has inherited, you just think it's going to be like a gold scepter or something. Like,
well, maybe it's a solid gold scooter. We don't know. We can only assume. But after Louis finally released them from singing Happy Birthday for the 60th time, they led the nation in the Clap for Our Carers. Just again, going to mention how bad that name is.
Yeah,
but
I'm still getting over that. This was only after Will had a little comic turn in a sketch with national treasure Stephen Fry, who was reprising his role as Melchett from the Blackadder series. And he revealed that since we last saw the character of Melchett, the family have spent generations serving the royals, and he himself was head of the royal household. Hence, Zoom call with Will.
This was part of a show they did on BBC, this comic relief big night in. So they had like tons of different comedians, and they had like politicians, they had broadcasters, singers, tons of people were involved with it. And to kick it off before the big clap, they had this sketch with Stephen Fry and Will. I feel like I missed out on a lot of references as somebody who has not seen Blackadder, but you were all over it.
Oh yeah, there were tons of Blackadder in-jokes, which were like honestly a little bit clumsy, especially because Rowan Atkinson and Tony Robinson weren't in the sketch, and they would arguably be more famous characters than Stephen Fry. But we got Will's own comic stylings, which I think made up for that.
He was pretty decent, I thought.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's expecting him to have impeccable comic timing, and I don't believe he had any say in what he was actually saying, in what had been written for him. But, you know, there were highs and lows. One of the jokes that a lot of people liked, not me as much, but a lot of people liked when Stephen Fry asked if he'd watched Tiger King, and he said, I tend to avoid shows about royalty. But I very much enjoyed at the end when Stephen Fry gives him his 45-second warning to get ready to go do the clap. And
he says,
on my way, let me just see if I can find my socks and my shoes and my trousers.
It's good. It's very funny.
Yeah, it was really good. His acting is, I think, exactly on the same level as Prince Harry's. But I think that this sketch went down better because Stephen Fry is an actor and Ed Sheeran is not. So
yeah, I'd have to agree. So after they do the Blackadder bit, Will is then joined by Kate and Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis outside the door of Anmore Hall, and they do their clapping. It's very sweet. Of course, the Daily Mail enlisted body language expert Judy James. We haven't checked in with her in a while.
No, I'm glad she's still working.
She's got some intriguing analysis here. So she notes that it's Charlotte who instigates the clapping, which leads Judy James to deem her the little leader in the family dynamic. 4-year-old Princess Charlotte is the leader, while George had to glance at his parents for approval before putting his hands together.
You see, I think that's a product of, I know they said that he doesn't really know he's going to become king, but I feel like from reading American royals and other things, kind of fictional monarchy, royal related things, you always get this narrative of like the one who's next in line having to kind of toe this very strict line, look to their parents
Following
for approval.
the blueprint.
It's a lot worse for them to commit something like a faux pas than for their younger siblings.
Judy James says that Charlotte also looks as competitive as her mother, as she seems to be putting the most energy into her clapping here. Which...
That's really good.
It's quite a funny thing to say about the kid. But I'm sure it hasn't escaped everyone's notice that every member of the family was dressed all in blue for the NHS, which was some rather aggressive colour coordination, but was a nice tribute and very, very Kate and Will.
I do feel like I've never seen them wearing any other colour than blue at this point. But it's been a very successful week for them, for Will and Kate. They're doing really well with the work from home stuff, and everyone is giving them a lot of praise for it.
No surprises there. I have to say, I did think, looking back on it, we got overexcited about Meghan Markle's appearance on Good Morning America. We had figured that it was pre-recorded, but hadn't realised it was just some old kind of junket-style footage that Disney had lying around from last summer or whenever she recorded her narration for Elephant, and it was like basically only a minute of her actually speaking. But parts of it I felt had a kind of relevancy for right now. When she said,
I hope that when people see this film, they realize how connected we all are. And if we had more of an awareness about the obstacles we're facing, I think we'd take care of each other, this planet, and animals in a very different way.
Well, yeah, that makes sense for now.
We also listened to Harry's interview on the Declassified podcast, the podcast for military veterans, and I have to say it was pretty dull, but I did love hearing Harry describe someone as a person
who's grabbed life by the balls.
I was so shocked because it wasn't the most scintillating conversation, so we just had it on in the background. I was making dinner and then he said grab life by the balls and my jaw dropped. I ran into the sitting room.
This is why he left the royal family, so he can speak freely about grabbing life by the balls.
And I'm all for it.
By the balls.
Of course, the big news this weekend was their virtual court hearing, which was held remotely on Friday via Microsoft Teams, which I hadn't heard of before this, but no Zoom for them. Meghan and Harry were said to be listening in from LA, although they would have been listening in very early because it started at what I believe was 3:30 a.m. local time for them.
Well, maybe if you've got a almost one-year-old baby, you might be up at that time anyway.
Perhaps. In case you haven't been following it though, Meghan is suing Associated Newspapers, the publisher of the Daily Mail, over 5 articles, 2 of which appeared in the Mail on Sunday and 3 on the Mail Online, which reproduced parts of a private letter she sent to her father, Thomas Markle, with the headline on one reading, revealed, the letter showing the true tragedy of Meghan's rift with a father she says has broken her heart into a million pieces. And we know that Meghan has previously said that any damages over and above the legal costs would be donated to an anti-bullying charity.
Earlier in the week, The Telegraph reported that legal documents show Meghan is prepared to reveal details of royal public funding in order to dispute the publisher's description of her immense wealth and privilege.
Already this case has involved so much overshare from them. Like, we talked on our bonus episode about all the text messages that Meghan made available in the court documents between her and Harry and her father. And now in this case, this would be the first time anyone would gain access to the specifics of royal funding. The Telegraph pointed out that a limited amount of information about the family's funding is made public through the annual accounts, but that omits details such as security costs and a bunch of other stuff. So this would be absolutely fascinating. Friday's hearing, though, was just a preliminary proceeding, which is, according to the Telegraph, a technical discussion around which parts of Meghan's case should be struck out ahead of the full trial. So, as we said, she's suing over those 5 articles, But her legal team have also submitted a further 9 articles, which they claim provide evidence of dishonesty and malicious intent. We spoke about these before. You can probably remember them. There's like that one that was like, Harry's girls almost straight out of Compton. And then there was the how Meghan's favourite avocado snack, beloved of all millennials, is fueling human rights abuses, drought and murder. There's a bunch of them. But anyway, Associated newspapers have called for these 9 articles to be struck out. And they argued they aren't pertinent to the claim and that her team doesn't have enough proof of dishonesty because dishonesty is like a state of mind.
Okay.
And they pointed out that those 9 articles, none of them were written by Carolyn Graham, who's the journalist who broke the story about the Thomas Markle letter.
I think it'll be very frustrating for all of us watching if these articles are struck. But the Telegraph also broke down the 4 questions that the case hinges on.
I felt like this was pretty helpful, like trying to wade through all the live tweets from legal reporters and trying to make sense of all this as it happens with very dense legal terminology can be quite challenging. But I thought this was like a pretty good breakdown of the central issues. So the first one is, did the media group have a vendetta against Meghan? Meghan's legal team is claiming that the Mail on Sunday and the Mail Online have acted with dishonesty and malicious intent.
Her lawyer put it that she believes there was a pattern of intrusive and offensive articles, and added that it was about the distress she feels about the realisation that the defendant has an agenda and that this is not a one-off.
But then the newspaper's lawyer said that such complex tests of mental state of the publisher are irrelevant to the claim for misuse of private information and has asked the judge to reject that allegation.
The next big question is, did Meghan's friends invade her privacy?
So this is all about that interview that Meghan's 5 close friends, unnamed friends, gave to People magazine last year. And we talked a little bit about this before. Meghan has said that she had no knowledge that they were going to do that. And Meghan's legal team have claimed that the publication of this letter to her father breached her privacy and her copyright. But Associated newspapers have argued that the existence of this letter was already in the public domain because her friends referred to it in that People magazine interview. So the judge has to decide whether Meghan had a reasonable expectation that the contents of the letter would remain private. I think that's going to be very interesting going forward if they have to give further evidence of how this People magazine interview came about.
Yeah, this might give us some more insight into that. Another question that is very important to this case is, was Thomas Markle manipulated by the press?
Meghan's legal team have claimed that the newspaper had harassed him, and they added that it had finally manipulated this vulnerable man into giving interviews, which Thomas Markle had later described as lies and bullshit. And this is kind of the big headline from the day in all the UK papers, that the publisher's lawyer had questioned how Meghan could have known her father felt harassed, humiliated, manipulated and exploited by the Mail when she hadn't actually spoken to him since before her wedding in 2018. So the lawyer said that her claims of harassment were remarkable, given that she hadn't contacted him to check if he agreed.
Yeah, there certainly were like a lot of headlines about how she hadn't spoken to him for 2 years. I wonder what new revelations there could be about their communication, given we already got those texts and things. The final big question is, did the Mail on Sunday report the letter dishonestly?
Harry and Meghan are claiming that Associated newspapers tried to cover up the fact that Harry and Meghan had tried to make contact with Thomas Markle to give the false impression that they had abandoned him in his hour of need. They also argued that the letter had been published by Associated newspapers to satisfy the curiosity of readers, which it had deliberately generated. But then the publisher's lawyer is arguing it's extremely common for the media to summarise or edit documents when reporting current events, and that is not a basis for an allegation of dishonesty. And they want those 9 articles talked about earlier excluded from the case. At the moment, they're waiting for the judge to issue a draft judgment, which he said he's hoping to do within a week. No date has been set for the full trial. From what I've been reading, it seems like there's going to be more of this kind of back and forth before they reach a proper trial. But at the moment, we'll just have to wait and see. I will say that a lot of the coverage that I've seen over here is quite negative. saying things like Meghan is invading her own privacy with this case. She's already lost. Things like, we saw pieces like that in the Times today, in opinion pieces, of course. And as we said, the big headline is about how she spoke for her father without checking to see if he agreed.
Quite negative coverage, and for me, I found that my eyes have really been opened to how complex this case is, and I have no idea what way this is going to go. Less idea than ever before.
On to our quote of the week, which comes from Prince William for me this week.
My new favourite comedian.
What was your favourite joke from his comic relief sketch?
I loved when he said,
Have you seen anything good on TV? It's hell without EastEnders.
That was very good.
I really felt like of all the lines, that could have been something that he had suggested or put in himself as a reference to the Queen's love of EastEnders.
Do you think Will even watches EastEnders?
No way. Absolutely not. But he knows that the Queen loves it. What about Fit for a Queen?
It's got to be Kate.
Yeah.
I was so delighted to see them coming out for this clap for carers. I thought it was really nice. They had such a good response to the video of the kids doing it a few weeks ago, and it was nice to see all of them together. And Kate had a new dress for the occasion, or one we hadn't seen before, a dress by Ghost, one of her high street faves. It was very Kate in that it was blue, that NHS blue, that it had the floral print, that it was midi length, and then it had these quite romantic ruffles around the neckline and the ruffled hem, and then a whole heap of fabric covered buttons all down the front.
It ticked every box for her, I think.
It looked gorgeous though, and she had nice strap earrings from Accessorize and nice blow dry. Very good at doing her own hair, if she is doing her own hair.
Yeah.
She's doing a good job of it. But I particularly liked that Ghost have announced that they would donate all of the online proceeds from the dress to NHS charities, and it's now completely sold out, which is a really heartwarming and thoughtful move, and a really good way of leveraging Kate's influence on fashion and on people's spending habits.
Yeah, that's a lot of instalments of £90 to go to the NHS.
What about first in line? Who is first in line this week?
I mean, it was pretty clear cut for me from the moment I found out that Prince Charles was planning on shipping a load of shit to Will. I thought that was king level pranking, but I also really loved that he shared a video message with Muslims across the UK marking the start of Ramadan. So it was a 4-minute video. He touched on quite a few different kind of aspects of what Ramadan means to him and his understanding of it for other people. He talked about how different it must be to celebrate Ramadan at a time when you have to isolate and social distance. And he gave thanks to British Muslims who are risking their lives working on the front lines against COVID-19. He also praised workers and volunteers from the Muslim community who are working alongside people of all faiths and none to support those in need across the UK. So again, this instance of the phrase all faiths and none, which I think was very powerful coming from someone who's going to be the head of the Church of England one day. So in this video, he quoted from the Quran, and he kind of, like I said, tried to give his understanding of what Ramadan, spirit of charity and selflessness means at the moment. And it kind of promoted a really modern and progressive message, I thought.
He also sent a message of support to the Jewish community this week as they marked Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. I thought it was just like a nice reminder of how much interest Charles has in being a multi-faith leader and how dedicated he is to embracing people of all faiths.
And none.
Yes, of course. And it made me think that he might be a lot more modern in that approach when he becomes king.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, will he still be able to do this kind of thing? I guess who's
going to stop him?
Yeah, who's going to stop him? And yet another thing to contribute to Charles being first in line was the phenomenal video of him and Camilla clapping for the carers.
Oh my God. Right at the end of that Big Night In clapping segment that was on the BBC, you had a little split second of Charles and Camilla emerging on this now infamous porch outside Burke Hall and doing the most bizarre clapping in recent memory.
I think that Camilla could really take some lessons from Charlotte, because Camilla arrived on the step first and she kind of like almost clapped a few times until Charles got there and led the clap himself.
They both look like people who are so unpracticed at clapping.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, they're used to being the object of people's applause rather than doing very much of their own applauding. But I just loved how awkward this video was, how quiet it was. And then it seemed like Charles was saying something to Camilla, but we couldn't figure out what it was. We asked people to send us if they could do like lip reading and help us figure it out. If you can, please let us know. We'd love to know what the hell he was saying while he was doing this most unusual clapping. But anyway, fair play to Charles.
Yeah.
And let's look ahead to next week.
So next week we're going to be doing our book club episode, talking about the American royals.
We do hope you'll come back and join us. We also expect to see some new photographs of Princess Charlotte to mark her 5th birthday. Oh, and also just to note that the Times reported today that Harry and Meghan will be releasing a new photo of Archie for his birthday in a couple of weeks. Don't know how, but their spokesperson confirmed that they will. So that's something else to look forward to a little further down the line. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest at AirheadsPod and on Facebook at Airheads.
If you like this episode, please leave us a 5-star review and tell a friend.
And we hope you have a great week and come back and join us next time.
Bye.
Bye.